Hey y'all, this is Phil from the future, coming to you hot off the heels of my conversation with the one and only Walker Bauer, Esquire. Our conversation is just a nice reflection about the meaning, purpose, and connections that are required to be successful in law, to get through law school, and what Walker personally does to recharge. I think the key element of today's conversation is all about connection and relationships. Listen in and see what you hear in this week's episode of the Grow Self Spiritual Fitness Podcast.
Never been on a podcast before, so I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, good. So I'm going to go ahead and just turn off my camera.
Camera off. You don't get to see my pretty mug anymore.
There it is. The reason why I've shifted to not even using the camera thing is because honestly the video editing is annoying and it also eats up a lot of bandwidth, like literally. And so by taking the camera away, I feel like it makes my life easier. But I wonder, like for me personally, sort of like talking into the void allows me to relax a little bit more
Yeah.
versus like the straight up contact of being like maintain eye contact. Oh shit, I'm staring at myself again in the screen. Okay, what did he say?
There's this whole, since COVID, everything, or not everything, but a lot of stuff has moved to Zoom. And there's this whole study of the human psyche about, Zoom or anything like Zoom, and just put your face in a little box. So it's face to face. And according to my CLEs, if you're going face to face with someone, usually that triggers your fight or flight reaction. So it's probably better to have the void, like you said.
Oh, I see. So you're saying that the research is showing that it actually causes people to be a little bit more on the defensive side of things by having this face to face, like the video feed on versus the video feed off.
Definitely, yeah.
Hmm. Does that mean that court proceedings would be more unbiased or perhaps more smooth if it was audio only?
I don't know about that. We like to see everybody, right? A lot of communication comes from things other than words. So you definitely want to be able to see who's talking or what they're doing. As far as biases, we like to think of ourselves as being able to set that aside. Of course, nobody can, but um, or nobody can completely. But I don't ever see a court proceeding going straight to just send in your audio file or something like that. I think everybody is built on this idea that it's adversarial and you get to see the person who's accusing you of something, or vice versa, the person who is defending themselves. It's kind of like the whole bedrock of the system.
Oh wow, yeah, you make a really good point. Yeah, I see that. Of course, that's all going to go down the tube once AI takes over and your job
Yeah,
becomes defunct.
yeah, exactly. Once the big five corporations, what is it in Terminator, Skynet? Once
Yes,
Skynet goes sentient, it doesn't matter anyway.
yes, and then the what's the Tom Cruise movie with the protocol where they're like the time police?
Time I don't know the time police one. Are you talking about the one where they're like they're in a loop? He keeps reliving the same day over and over again.
No, no, he's like the time police where they have like an AI computer that's able to predict people's behavior, and so they like arrest people before they actually commit the crime because the algorithm predicts that like it's going to happen,
I
and
don't think
he's
I've seen that one.
part of the system. It's like the protocol or something like that.
I'm adding it to my list.
Yes, please do so. It is a very prime post Mission Impossible early 2000s Tom Cruise that is not as. Let's look it up just real quick because this is important. This can be part of the podcast. Important information to come up. While I do that, how about you give your little introduction to yourself?
Yeah. So my name's Walker. I live in Bernie, right outside of San Antonio. I practice law in San Antonio as a civil litigator. Means basically I do any civil cases that end up in court, minus family law. I don't do a whole lot of family law or a lot of um, collections cases, although the guy who works right next to me does a lot of debt collection and things like that. So I help out with him a little bit. I do a lot of insurance defense, a lot of car wreck cases, construction defect cases. Went to TCU with Phil and a lot of the other previous guests on here.
Go
And
Frogs.
then went to St. Mary's University for law school, and then got hitched to my beautiful wife Katie, and we've stayed around ever since.
Mm. It's a great thread story, and as I've said to everyone else, one of the joys of this show is getting to just sort of like reflect on our friendship and like bask in the fact that it's 2025 and we met each other 13 years ago when we were in different places in our lives, and it's kind of cool, man, right? To be here on this side of things.
Yeah. What's funny is we actually hung out with another mutual friend of ours this weekend, Melanie, and we're doing a little reflecting on that as well. I didn't meet her till sophomore year, so we were saying that we had known each other, yeah, I think 11 years, and it is pretty wild to look back and think about where we were, when we were freshmen or sophomore in college, and where everybody is now. Makes you appreciate the adults in your life a lot more when you were growing up, thinking you were a kid knowing everything, and then realizing once you get here that not only did you not know anything then, you still don't know that much. At
Oh
least speaking for
man,
myself.
that's some great wisdom there. Minority Report is the name of the movie.
Ah, okay, all right. It's going on the
2002.
list. It's going on the list.
Please do so, and then we can have a follow-up episode offline for paid subscribers only, where we can just talk about Minority Report
All
and
right.
its relationship to spiritual fitness. You can call our mutual friend Taylor, and I'm sure you'll get the whole big bag and caboodle.
Yeah, we'll loop him in on the Minority Report episode.
Yes, indeed. Well, we can just do a whole big workshop, and who knows? This podcast could eventually just turn into we talk about Tom Cruise films as friends from college, and this doesn't go anywhere else from there. And this is the actual first episode of Walker and Phil's movie marathon review board.
Hey, I don't mind that.
Okay, so being a lawyer, there are it's a very common job title that people know about, and it's a respectable job. There are so many ways to be a lawyer, and I'm thinking about the connections to spiritual fitness, so I'm wondering if maybe you could sort of help me out with this. So, as I'm coming to talk about spiritual fitness more, I'm seeing it as a way to describe like intrinsic resiliency and those ways in which that resiliency can be built up is how people have purpose in life, like the roles that they have, how people understand their worldview, like paradigm, their meaning, and how they understand why things happen, and then the community, the relationships that they have. Those three areas, purpose, meaning, and connection, are kind of like the main sources of what I would say creates spiritual fitness, i.e., intrinsic resiliency. So I think I'd love to hear about how you how you connect with those ideas in either your personal or your professional life. What stands
Yeah,
out to you?
I mean, I think it kind of all goes between professional and personal life. There's so much overlap just because as all of us, you and all of our friends from college and everybody else that I'm sure you've talked to. I mean, as Americans, we work an awful lot, right? I mean, you're just by pure hours spent working, your work life kind of falls into your personal life, and I think who you are personally kind of molds you into who you are as a worker. Going off of the things that you mentioned, or the buckets that you mentioned on spiritual fitness. I mean, as far as purpose and meaning, I kind of mold those two into one. Uh, I like helping people. I want to make sure that currently now my clients, because I'm an attorney, get the best outcome they can, or that I'm able to at least advise them as, hey, yeah, that might be how it works on a TV show, but that's not how it works in the real life, right? And
Right.
and so, but that kind of piggybacks off what I've hoped to do since probably in high school, and I can credit my parents for this. Just being just bettering myself a little bit every day or every month or year, just trying to work towards being a either a better person or a little bit smarter, a little bit more fit, a little bit further down the road in life, just to keep building the bag and keep moving forward as a person. So I think those two things kind of go hand in hand. As I want to be a better lawyer every day, and I want to be a better person every day.
Hmm. And as you had said, it's that desire to help people, which is sort of the foundation of who you are, that has then kind of propelled you to make the choices in light of that core value. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of reflection, right? I don't know if you went back to myself 13 or 14 years ago when you and I met, if I would say I want to be a lawyer because I want to better myself every day, and I want to help people in their worst times every day, right? I grew up in a family of lawyers, so it was kind of always around me as a kid. It's what we talked about at the dinner table. It's what I heard mom and dad talking about, right? And so it's what I grew up knowing. But simultaneously, I got to see them helping people. And then once I really started looking into going to law school or becoming a lawyer, as you said, there's 1,000 different career paths or different types of lawyer you can be. So you start looking at, or at least I started looking at the ones that's what type of lawyer gets to interact with people on a day-to-day basis, and maybe help them out in a time when they're really looking down the barrel of something that's not very fun or life altering, and get to help them out a little bit.
Hmm. And I agree with that, with what you're saying as someone on the outside looking in at your life, because as long as I've known you, you've been a person oriented, you've been people oriented in terms of social interactions and engagement, that level of um, sort of just kind of positive energy that's brought being among your in your presence, and how you kind of become part of the group in those ways is it's been something I've noticed about you, and to hear how you've been able to then find within your kind of pre-selected career path a way in order to scratch that itch or to be more true to yourself. I mean, that's a beautiful thing, because it's not every day that people are able to find that, both literally in their job, like the actual job description, and then in their experience of the job. Because like I see that as, I totally agree with you with this idea that, especially as Americans, yes, most of our day is spent working, and so it does become part of like who we are. And there are plenty of people who have, on one hand, the ability to make the most of their tasks and work, even if it's not exactly what they like matches up with what they'd want to do. For instance, like the manager at Whataburger, who has an incredible spirit and incredible attitude, and like they're doing things, but at the same time they're also only working at a franchise fast food restaurant, and that's its tasks can be kind of rather menial, versus folks who are doing something that's incredibly meaningful in and of itself, such as brain surgery or something like that, where like they're saving the lives of children, pediatric brain surgery, but they themselves don't like it and they get burnt out. And so you are describing how you have actions, work itself, that is meaningful, and then you have an attitude that also makes it more meaningful. Therefore, it becomes like enhanced. That's
Yeah,
that's that's what I'm hearing.
yeah, definitely. And I mean, just bouncing off another thing of like my purpose or meaning, and I like to learn, right? I mean, if I could have stayed in college forever, I would have. It was the best. I actually liked going to class. I liked reading and learning. And that's another cool thing about, yeah, not to be like a big sales pitch to go to law school or be a lawyer, but
Hey man, pitch away.
that's another, don't do it. Go, go anywhere else. No, I'm just kidding. Um, but, it's called the practice of law for a reason, right? I mean, you get to things that the law changes in Texas every 2 years, in the U.S. whenever they decide to change it, right? And then so you get to keep learning. Things keep changing. You get to keep learning. You get to keep kind of making unique or crafty arguments about what words mean or what a sentence should say, type stuff. And so it not only does it give me the purpose as far as helping people or keeping me engaged with people, but it also helps me keep learning and just kind of, as you put it, scratch that itch of, well, I'm a little bit tired of this, and let me look at something else, or read about something else that is coming up in another case or something like that.
Yeah. Now, going back to something you said just a little bit earlier is about how you discover being a lawyer. You said that looking back in college, if you had asked yourself, why do you want to be a lawyer? It would be probably a different answer than what you were able to say now, or at least not as formed. Saying that you grew up in a family of lawyers, and that like popped up in my mind how our spiritual fitness can be a product of our upbringing, or at the very least, our initial understanding of what spiritual fitness looks like comes from our family. Can
Yeah,
you can you talk a little bit more about like thinking about how your parents helped form your understanding of meaning and or purpose or community connection, like that taught you those values or
yeah. I
ideas?
mean, I'm very close with my parents. I'm all very close with my siblings. We all grew up in a little town, had like 12,000 people in it. It was a rural area in South Texas, and so, I mean, I spent a lot of time with my folks and a lot of time with my siblings, just hanging out around the house, or both my parents worked for themselves for a while. They worked together but worked for themselves, and so, if I got picked up from school and they weren't done with work yet, I got to go sit at the office and do my homework, or shoot rubber bands at at the secretary until we were ready to go home. It was it was a great childhood, but obviously, I mean, just being in that circle, or kind of being uh, as close knit a family as we were, it was, yeah, everybody kind of fed off of each other and saw what others were doing, or at least were exposed to, like what mom and dad were doing at work, or what people in the community were relying on them to do. Probably, like, I mean, just, being a kid, you don't really realize what's going on, but you look back on those things, and yeah, it definitely shapes you. Definitely makes you more interested in things, or less interested in things, based on either what you're able to do or what is around you. So, I mean, I think that they played a huge role in me eventually going to law school and being where I am now.
Mm. But on the other hand, it could have easily, like psychology speaking, like it could have easily gone the other way of like, like, oh man, my parents, they were always late at work and they dragged me to the office and I had nothing to do but just to play with rubber bands and man, I grew up in this small town and I just couldn't wait to get out of it and get as far away from law and South Texas as possible. And
Yeah,
here you are doing the exact opposite, practicing law, and you're back in South Texas.
yeah. I mean, the difference being, we're not living in a small town. I don't see that happening anytime. I guess some people would refer to Bernie as a small town, but when you grew up in a town of 12,000 people, a town of 100,000 people is like the big city, right?
Mm-hmm.
And So yeah, we definitely could. My mom would have loved if I'd done anything other than law, right? I mean, she wanted somebody in the family to be a doctor. Uh, Luckily, I'm married to a nurse practitioner now, so I guess that kind of worked out for her. But I definitely. I mean, I agree with what you said. Definitely could have worked the opposite way. Just happens that it didn't. I mean, neither of my siblings want anything to do with law, so maybe I was just being the oldest child. I guess I just took the brunt, and then ended up where I am. And now my siblings are like, heck no, we're not going to law school. We're done with that.
Oh, okay.
But more likely to live in a small town than me, so I guess it kind of evens out in the wash.
Right, you get one thing or the other in the way. I mean, where I'm at right now, especially with being a new father, is I just see so much of like how my parents' fingerprints are all over me. And lots of things that I kind of took for granted. I myself am like, oh, okay, no, this wasn't just like randomly appeared in my life. This was given to me and then like built over 32 years of living, and that's why I am the way that I am. And like I can thank my parents for that, and I also can thank my choices.
Yeah.
And it's kind of answered a lot of questions for me. You um you are an incredible you are yeah, I can't talk. You said that you have this. No, I lost it. I lost it. I lost my train of thought. Does that ever
That's
happen to
okay.
you?
It's
You ever lose
Wednesday
your train
night.
of thought in the courtroom? Does that ever happen to you, where you're like
Oh
talking
yeah.
mid sentence and
Yeah, you got to come up with some kind of little catchphrase, like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor, just looking for a piece of paper here, real quick."
oh, okay,
But oh yeah, yeah,
okay,
especially Wednesday at 6 p.m. The thoughts
yes,
start to wander.
they do start to wander, and that's perfect. And you know what? This is why we have editing, because I'm gonna like bring in this pause, and we use that pause and cut it in, and no one will ever know that this part
Everyone will think
happened.
that we were just flowing and we're just
Flowing,
incredible the whole time.
yes, it is. Uh, so I know for the people looking outside being a lawyer that going to law school is not an easy task. And I know that you're a humble person, and also you described yourself as someone who likes to learn. But at the same time, you have accomplished something that is incredible, and it's something that people, they themselves say that they want to do and never do, or they begin and in the process of trying to get there, they end up quitting or changing. And I believe that your success is a result of that intrinsic resiliency. What sources did you tap into? What helped you get through law school? And what pushed you when you were in the middle of the dark valley to continue to fight and not give up?
Yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate all the compliments too. But it's probably a couple things. I am naturally just a very competitive person. And so that helped me a lot in law school because everything's graded on a curve, right? And so if you're in the top 10% of the grade, you get an A. And so I'm just competitive that way. I always want to be number one, or at least be the best I can be. So that definitely helped out a lot. Funny enough, one thing that I think helped out a lot that majority of my class didn't have is that I worked out in the quote unquote real world for a couple years after undergrad before going back to law school. And so uh, once you've been out in the real world and gotten a taste of that and seen what the day to day is and the corporate grind, law school was, at least the law school was still hard, but the law school schedule was awesome because it was, you went to class for maybe 4 or 5 hours a day, did some reading, did your studies for the next day. Uh, it wasn't you didn't do that every day. You usually had classes 3 or 4 days a week, and then had 3 days, 3 day weekends or a day in the middle of the week off. And so I think the two things that helped me the most were being competitive and also knowing that out in the real world, it was a totally different story than in the confines of that school. And as soon as you get done with your 3 years, you're right back out in the real world. So you just better enjoy it while you're there.
Mm. Oh man, I am so much in this boat with you, and I couldn't agree more. My time in divinity school was just like that. I I unfortunately um, went. I didn't. I don't think I took as much advantage of that as I wish I could. We were both at school during the pandemic, right? I was 19 through 22.
Yeah, so I was 19 through 21.
Yeah, and so having school to being in school during the pandemic, I thought was sort of great, right? Because like there wasn't too much disruption.
Yeah, well, I didn't like school in the pandemic because everything went on Zoom, so I wasn't
Right.
going to campus. I wasn't seeing my friends or interacting like we did before that. It definitely freed up a lot more time, right? Like I was working out, I think 5 or 6 times a week, and it was good for that, uh, but not so good for just being shut in my house and not having that social interaction that we talked about a little earlier.
Mm-hmm. Because with being a people oriented person, that disconnection is definitely more of an impact on someone like yourself versus our introverted, more cat-like people. We're like, hey, COVID happened, sweet. I no longer have to make up excuses to not hang out with people.
Exactly.
It was a
Yeah.
dream come true to those folks. You mentioned that the top two reasons were this idea of like, kind of goes back to who you are, being a competitive person, and here's an opportunity to excel, and you're just kind of driven by that shiny prize of self-imposed goals, which, in my opinion, intrinsic. It's all about that intrinsic stuff is so much more motivating than external factors. One person can say, Walker, you need to be number one. But when you say, I need to be number one, the outcome is totally different. Um, I was wondering about this. I mean, like the idea about completing law school, though, with it being, you said it was your guiding factors for being competitive. What was the second part?
Just that I'm not gonna try and sugarcoat law school. I mean, it was hard, but uh, just the schedule you have in law school is nothing like the schedule you have when you have a regular job uh, as a lawyer or as a non-lawyer, just in the corporate grind. And so I think my experience working for a large corporation before going to law school just kind of taught me that I needed to utilize and enjoy my 3 years in law school while I had it, because it was as soon as it was over, I was going to get right back into the grind of there aren't really any set hours in my job, but just back in the grind of work never really stops unless you make it stop, and then you also have all the other life things that you have to do. So,
Right.
not saying it was a vacation from real life or anything, but it was just a just a different. Just had a lot more flexibility in school than you do when you're not in school.
Mm. And right, and that was the point that I heard, which is your life experience helped inform your interaction with this with school, and so that's what also made it easier because you had something known as perspective, and it
Yeah,
helped provide you some gratitude. And so you sitting next to the same person who didn't have that same perspective wasn't able to achieve the gratitude, so they were complaining about the fact that they've got 4 hours of reading to do, but nothing else to do but read. And you're like, what? I only have 4 hours of reading to do and nothing else to do. Come on, sign me up.
yeah, I agree with. Yeah, I think that's spot on.
Oh man, and there it is. There's like another like cool part of where this like spiritual fitness idea of mine is like applies here because like that's meaning. That's in the meaning bucket right there. How you're understanding your experience and how you interpret it. So let's connect this now to where you are in your current work. One thing that I see as a chaplain in the hospital, especially a pediatric chaplain, where The majority of my work is I'm working with parents who are terrified or anxious or nervous or exhausted, or insert any emotion that you could imagine, because their loved one, their child, their flesh and blood is in the hospital for some
Yeah.
reason. And I see a big difference in how people experience being in the hospital based on how well they can cope with it. You take two people, put them in the same exact situation with the same exact resources, and their internal coping skills, their intrinsic resiliency, aka their spiritual fitness, can be what makes a sucky experience suck less. Now, applying this to your work, you've got clients and you've got people who go through some pretty hard times, and they're turning to you to help them get out of it, and if even resolve it. Have you seen any unifying themes or dividing factors that that basically separate your clients between those who are able to ride out the storm of the legal process better than others?
Uh, I think you nailed it with your analogy to the people you see in the hospital, where it's just I don't want to say some people have it and some people don't, but it's just some people handle things better than others, right? Based on their everything we've talked about so far tonight, their experiences or their purpose or their meaning, that they have from any number of things in their past.
Hmm.
And I'd say that's the same in probably with people in any situation, but when people get sued or want to sue, a lot of times, I guess what the most dividing thing, or the thing that is the most different between different clients is patience, right? I mean, the court process is not fast, right? And so a lot of people will either come in really upset that they've been sued, or come in really upset and want to sue somebody. But then when they really look at it, and see what the process is going to be, what it's going to entail, things like that. Some people are game for it, right? They're patient. They don't care how long it takes. They want justice, right? And some people look at that and say, "Well, I don't have time for that, or I don't want to spend my time doing that," and cool off pretty quickly. So I think I think that's probably the most divisive thing between, as you put it, clients that have it and clients that don't. But it's yeah, like you said, everybody reacts a little differently, based on their previous experiences and things like that.
Hmm. It's cool. It's cool to hear how, like, this thing that I've been noticing in the hospital is also plays out in your career field. And when you think about it, it's like, well, no, duh, because like it's not like these. I've noticed that these are the things that people carry in with them. They're not just getting them when they show up in the hospital. Same thing with your world. It's not like they just like show up on your doorstep and you hand them this patient's package. They're walking in with it.
Yeah.
Mm, is there any? I'm wondering. I mean, do you have any work stories that come into mind about a time when someone's patience or lack thereof really influenced, just to put it bluntly, how much they suffered while they were waiting for justice? Did anything like that pop up in your mind, or something related?
Yeah, I hate to disappoint and say nothing off the top of my head. I mean, the good news about the type of work I do, I guess, good news and bad news, is that it's essentially, sometimes there's a dispute about stuff, but it's almost always just disputes about money, right? And so it's not, you're not, I'm not dealing personally with a lot of, people losing their house, um, or people at risk of losing their kids, or things like that, things that are really, really emotionally charged. uh, the most emotional cases that I deal with are, people fighting over probated assets, or people fighting over people who've died stuff, basically. And so,
Oh, they're grieving.
yeah, grieving. The grieving period has ended, and the aunt and uncle have taken everything, or stepmom wants all the money, things like that.
Right.
Or daughter doesn't like that mom and dad cut her out of the will, and so she needs to fight about it. But I can't think of one that really comes to mind where it would be a good example of saying, "Oh, look at this person who exhibited fortitude in the face of something really bad and got what they needed or got what they deserved." Um, you know, all 99% of those cases settle, and usually a good settlement means everybody's mad. So probably you can ask those people, how did it work out, and they'll say, well, I should have gotten more, but they're just tired and needed to settle, kind of thing. Um, which is all the settlements I've been a part of, I think were good settlements, and uh, most people come around in the end. After a year or so, you'll get a message or something saying, yeah, it was a good thing that we did that, because now they're living their best life, or things like that. But that's kind of just the day in and day out stuff of handling civil cases.
Mm. So, with the last little chunk of questions on this, staying with your work and stuff, I hear how you talk about it and how well you describe it. And from what you said up until now, like, and everything that I've kind of reflected on, it's just like, you love what you do, and you sound like you're good at it. What is um, what's the hard part about your job? The stuff that kind of challenges your internal resiliency, that that you might be struggling with, or that makes the job more
Yeah,
difficult than you would imagine.
uh, probably two things. I'll give you two quick examples on those. First one is just time commitment, right? I mean, lawyers are notorious for not having a work-life balance. I've made it a point in my practice and in my life to prioritize work-life balance. So if you ask some people, I probably work too much, but I work a lot less than other attorneys in my office, right? So um, there are a lot of long hours, and there are a lot of uh, questions that you don't always necessarily have answers to, right? Or maybe even the law doesn't have an answer to, that you need to go find. And those make for long nights, sometimes sleepless nights, but it hasn't, it has never, or at least to this point, not negatively impacted my personal life, just because I've made a point of prioritizing the work life balance. Although sometimes that's a little give and take, right? One week I'll work 90 hours, and the next week I'll work 25 hours, kind of thing. Um, the other one is just that the way our system's set up, and the type of law I do, it's adversarial, right? So lawyers, we try and get along. We make a point of being cordial to each other, uh, and trying to work together. But sometimes lawyers forget that the lawyers aren't the ones fighting; it's the clients that are fighting, and the lawyers are just helping the clients. All right, and so occasionally you'll get into a very heated argument or disagreement with opposing counsel, and I think just like anybody who gets into a disagreement or a big argument with somebody, even though that's my job and that's their job, it can be draining at times, especially if it's prolonged or ongoing. And so just kind of gearing up for that stuff and being ready. It's probably the toughest part, but I would not I would not trade it for anything else. I think it's a great system, it's also, like I said, keeps me on my toes and keeps me learning. So I get to get into those arguments and sometimes learn things from the people I'm arguing with.
So with that, the idea of time management and like the level of conflict and the impact it has, what are things that you do? What are actions that you take to spiritually recharge?
I mean, we do a lot. I mean, I love spending time at home, either with my family or, I mean, especially with my wife, Katie. We just try and spend as much time together as possible every day. We eat. I can't think of many times during the week that we don't eat dinner together. So we just make sure that we have that time together, that we get to tell each other about our days, and then hang out when we can with our friends or family to recharge with them, and uh, then just keep enjoying life, because what's the point if not to enjoy it a little bit? We go hiking a lot, go on trips. Just went to Scotland last year. That was awesome. So we're definitely finding times for ourselves to not only spend time together and make sure we're each other's support, but also to go out and have some fun together and experience new things.
Well, all I can say is, well, no shit. Like, yeah, it's either I'm stumbling upon something where it's like, well, this is a non-argument because it's just circular, or this is really a good way of describing the sort of like the human element of things. Because, like, of course, you, a person who is people oriented and enjoys the helping and working with others, and coming from a family of good and strong and healthy connections and relationships, of course, the way that you're going to recharge and find more spiritual fitness in your life is by doing that. Like, duh.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to hang out with your people, and maybe meet some new people along the way. Is That's what we like to do, and I think it gives us kind of an adrenaline rush.
Mm-hmm.
When you meet someone new and you're like, hey, we might be friends. You never know. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
might be enemies, might be friends. It's a 50-50 shot, right?
It's
And
true.
and so that's fun, and then just experiencing new things with the people that you like. I mean, that's always you make those memories. That's what you hold on to in those times that you're feeling like you need a recharge. And so then you throw in a few things like go crazy on a four-wheeler, or go to the range and shoot some explosive targets. I mean, that never hurts either.
There's the South Texan in you.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's beautiful. Last little reflection question: any advice do you, that you might have that you'd like to share to those listening who are considering either honestly the legal process or considering joining law school? Do you have any advice or thoughts in the realm of spiritual fitness?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a lot smarter people to give you this advice than me. But if anybody out that's listening to this wants to go to law school, I'm happy to talk to them more. The biggest bit of advice I could give, as far as either getting ready to go to law school or contemplating going to law school and being uh, or reviewing their spiritual fitness and the buckets that we've talked about today. I mean, just yeah, I think really do some reflection and make sure you understand, like Phil, like you put it so well a minute ago. Like, what do you do to recharge? What do you do when things aren't going well, or when things are really hard? What resets you, or what gets you back in the right mind? And that's really important in law school, because things aren't always going to go that well. And so uh, I think it would be important just to have that self reflection. Maybe hop on your podcast, Phil, and have a conversation with you. Just kind of reflect on yourself and say, what are those things I need to hold near and dear to me to get me through the dark times that unfortunately you'll have at least one or two of them during the 3 years you're in law school. So what do you want to hold on to counteract those times that are difficult?
Mm. And going off of that, not only what are you going to hold on to, but who are you going to hold on to? And if you happen to be so lucky, who will hold on to you?
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
Never
Very
hurt to
good.
have someone holding on to you.
Hold me close, I'm tired of dancer. Beautiful. Walker Bauer, thank you so much for joining me on the Grow Self Spiritual Fitness podcast. And for everyone tuning in, thank you so much. And tune in next week for another great episode.
Yeah, appreciate you having me. Talk to you soon.